stand up, or all you'll see is my waist. Tēnā tātou katoa, we seek wisdom, understanding, insights into the views and circumstances of others, strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others. And somebody has got their mic on halfway through my affirmation. Please.
Daniel.
Letting everything play out rather publicly.
Please, I think Daniel, please take your mic off. Okay, that was a bad start to the meeting. Let me begin again, I think. Tēnā tātou katoa, we seek wisdom, understanding, insights into the views and circumstances of others, strength to seek what we believe in, humility to accept the combined decisions of others, patience, good humour at all times, tolerance and courtesy, while working in the best interests of our community. And welcome, and just a reminder, we're on Teams, so we can have our cameras on, but please keep your mic off when you're not wanting to be heard, as we've just seen. Apologies, Sandra, any apologies at all?
No apologies received. Thank you, Mayor Phil. And can we do a roll call, please?
Yes, we should do the roll call first. So I will ask you to conduct the roll call, please, Sandra.
Thank you. Te Māori members. Deputy Mayor Cashmore. Right, not online. Councillor Bartley.
Morena.
Councillor Casey.
Morena.
Councillor Collins.
Morena, Sandra, Morena, Mayor. And just to add, Mr. Mayor, I may leave briefly during the meeting. There's a VAC centre at my old high school, and that's being rolled out today. So I may be absent for about an hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coombe.
Morena koutou, kia ora Sandra, nice to see everybody.
Councillor Cooper.
Kia ora koutou and happy birthday to Councillor Young.
Councillor Dalton.
Morena.
Councillor Darby.
I'm here.
Councillor Filipina.
Talofa Sandra and talofa all. I won't have the camera on, your worship, because it means moving all my furniture in the lounge around, and I won't be doing that. Kia ora.
Councillor Fletcher.
Kia ora, Ana, and I'll be in and out with the camera because of Wi-Fi bandwidth today.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
G'day everybody.
Councillor Hills.
Kia ora koutou katoa, and thank you all for all the support and nice messages, and Theo and we are doing great. So I'm glad to be back and glad to be on Teams. How refreshing. Cool.
And welcome back, Councillor Hills.
I missed you all.
Thank you. Councillor Mulholland.
Good morning, everyone.
Councillor Newman.
Good morning.
Councillor Sayers.
Good morning. I probably won't have my camera on just due to bandwidth in the rural area. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Good morning. Happy birthday, Paul. Welcome back, Richard, and congratulations on your baby.
Councillor Stewart.
Good morning.
Councillor Walker.
Morning.
Councillor Watson.
Buenos dias.
Councillor Young, and many happy returns.
Thank you very much, and kia ora, 大家早.
Back to you, Mayor Phil.
And we welcome also IMSB member Glenn Wilcox, who's here because he's been a panel member for the Regulatory Committee and working really hard. Thank you for that, Glenn, as well. Yeah, it is good to be able to see everybody on the screen where you've got the bandwidth. Can we just double check whether the Deputy Mayor has arrived yet? Bill, are you there? We might get somebody just to give him a call. He may be having problems with his internet. I might get Sandra to do that. Very good. So we have no apologies other than I noted Councillor Collins may have early departure to attend a VAX centre. Are there any other apologies? If not, I'll move that we accept the apology from Councillor Fessor Collins for early departure. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, second, Mayor.
Seconded, Kathy Casey. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no.
Aye.
Carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? And I welcome Bill online, Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashmore. Confirmation of the minutes. These are the minutes of the 28th of October 2021. I'll move that we accept those minutes as a true and accurate record. Do I have a seconder, please?
Second, Simpson.
Councillor Simpson will second that. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no.
Aye.
Aye.
I was a little quick there, sorry. Should have shown more decorum. We have no petitions. We do have a public input in relation to Pest-Free Kaipatiki Restoration Society, and I'll just double check if Joe Knight is online yet, please.
Yes.
There, Joe.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. So obviously we have item number 13, I think it is, on the agenda, which is the transfer of the Old Glenfield Bowling Club to Pest-Free Kaipatiki Restoration Society. And we look forward to your presentation, and then after that also welcome John Gillen, Chair of Kaipatiki Local Board, online. So when we get to that item, I'll ask John to speak as well. But Joe, the floor is yours. Usually it's up to 5 minutes, and if there are any questions, I think we've all read the paper, and I'm expecting that there'll be good support for the recommendations in the paper. Joe, I'll pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, councillors, officers. Thank you very much for this time where we can actually talk to you. I wanted to do three things this morning. I wanted to very briefly tell you what we do at Pest-Free Kaipatiki Restoration Society, tell you about the social impacts that come from that, and the importance to mental health. So we're a young organisation. We are very keen to retain the forest cover we have, and in fact increase it if we can, particularly in our reserve areas. And we also are keen to keep the social impact and the mental health of the organisation, of the area, up to scratch. There is good documentary evidence now that having green areas are very important for mental health. So to move right along. Next slide, please. You can see that in Kaipatiki area, on the North Shore, we've got a lot of reserves being looked after by volunteers, 28 of them, many of them with active weed control. We as Pest-Free Kaipatiki Restoration Society overview or umbrella a lot of groups. We supply them with materials, information, and we also have a free area where we loan tools and materials to the residents that are helping us, setting up the ecological halos, which we use to surround bush areas or areas of ecological significance, and keep rats, possums and stoats in control in those areas. Next slide, please. Not going?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. And in addition, we have a number of really important but specific programs. The Greening of Kaipatiki is to provide extra nesting areas for some of the birds that are missing out on the big old trees that give them the hollows. So it's called Hollows for Homes. But also encourage people to regard their bush and their trees with more respect, so that we get less trees cut down where it's possible, and less trees damaged as well. We do a lot of planting to replace the weeds that we've removed, and we also provide pest plant disposal for the residents so that we can encourage them to get rid of things like moth plant, and we get rid of the seeds into an area where they're not going to get redistributed. We in Kaipatiki are very lucky to have a huge area of kauri. We have got 2 diseased trees, and it is the aim of Pest-Free Kaipatiki to keep it that way, and we've got great cooperation from our population. We've had several big surveys and programs going. Buffer Survey Project was in fact something that was a contract with the council where we actually went round surveying the households around valuable reserves to find out their propensity for getting rid of the plant pests within their area, and we got a really great response. We were very pleased. We're very lucky that we've got a couple of very great swamp areas within Kaipātiki still. Soldiers Bay Diversity area is a fantastic area, worked on by a very active group of volunteers and highly utilised by the population. Of course, we also have school programs, freshwater programs, support street champions, who are people who support the buffers, and the tool shed is also important. Hit squads, very interesting group of people who go out usually on Monday mornings, usually big groups of retired people who actually have a very social time, but actually work for about 4 hours in the morning, then have coffee together, often in many of the reserves that we've got here in Kaipātiki, sometimes on private property too. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, okay. Why do we want to gain the Glenfield Bowling Club? Well, it's because we have been crammed into a tiny office at the bottom of Fern Glen. We're very grateful to Fern Glen for that offer, but we have now grown to the extent that really it's only legal to keep about 1 or 2 people in that office, and these photographs I'll point out were taken pre-COVID, and that it's very difficult to work in these circumstances, and so that does actually affect efficiency. We never have everything all in the same place. Next slide, please. This is where we run the tool shed from. This is open every Saturday morning, and in the last fiscal year, we loaned out to 900 different inquiries during those Saturday mornings. If we can move to the Glenfield Bowling Club, we can run this every day, because we'll have people in the office every day so that we can loan things out to the residents who are helping us control these areas. And of course, the residents are keen on doing that because we now, in some areas of Kaipātiki, have got 4 times, this is measured, the number of birds that we had when we started. So every winter we measure the birds and also the levels of rats and possums in the area using chew cards, so that we can actually scientifically say, well, we have actually made a difference. Thank you. Next slide. The Glenfield Bowling Club would be a perfect base. It's got ample room. We only really will redevelop and use the top level. The bottom level will remain basement and for storage. We will be able to run that tool shed, as I said, which services Kaipātiki residents. The key, we feel, to getting people to cooperate is to provide them with information, but also the tools. Removing barriers is one of the ways that we get good cooperation. The bowling green is an area that we're really keen to use, and just recently we've been negotiating to move some totara logs there that have been illegally felled in one of our reserves, so that they can be carved into po. We will reuse the existing water retention system that was put in by the bowling club to water plants and other materials there, and also probably run the toilets actually in the end. We'll use it to secure housing for our trailer, which we use for many events, and it'll give us a good central position in Kaipātiki in the middle of Glenfield, which is an area that needs more help and development, and we've already got exciting plans in the wings ready to do that. Of course, we will be able to hire out parts of it at reasonable rates for other community groups, and that will provide us with a bit of revenue, so we can use that revenue to help run the building, help pay for the bills that come in with the building, and also provide some ongoing maintenance. But the biggest thing is it would maintain our vibrancy, our momentum, and really increase our profile in areas where we haven't moved yet. Thank you.
Joe, we're running a bit short. We've gone over time a little bit, so if you can skip through these remaining slides quite quickly, that'd be great. It's a great presentation, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're pretty strict on our time.
Okay. Righto then. To do this, we've got a fantastic partnership with Naylor Love, so we could skip over a couple here. And we've got a lot of free material being given to us. So leader scaffolding, we've got free project management, free electrical work, free legal advice, free architectural services, all from the community that are around us. So there's huge support for this. And if we can move on now, one more. Please. This is an artist's impression of what it could look like once we've developed that and perhaps had permission to occupy the sides of the reserve, so that we can plant these areas and use it as a burgeoning community reserve area. So I'd like to thank the Kaipatiki Local Board, of course the Auckland Council, and also the Birkenhead Licensing Trust, who have all been a great support to us as we've got ready to launch out on this really exciting business. So we're just dying to get into this building. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was a great presentation, and I think confirmed for all of us the incredible work that you're doing there. Congratulations on that. I have got one question, first of all, in the name of Councillor Chris Darby.
Thank you, Mayor, and kia ora, Joe. Great presentation. You put a strong case. You put that to the local board as well, and notice John Dillon's on this call, so he would endorse that. Joe, I just, you know, for us, this building is a bit of a liability, and I go to paragraph 61 of the report, and I just want you to confirm this, that paragraph 61 reads, transferring ownership of the buildings to Pēswhiri Kaipatiki will also transfer responsibility for all future costs associated with the building to the occupant, Pēswhiri Kaipatiki. So you concur with that? This won't see council budgets called upon. You've got a really strong group, and you can endure the costs of you know, restoring and getting this wonderful proposal realised. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Councillor Darby. When we went in to do the EOI, we were very much helped by Naylor Love, big construction company. They brought on the day of the EOI along their structural engineer and some other experts from the area, and they had a look over the building as well. And in fact, they then took the list of 53 things that needed to be done to the building and sorted them and put a provisional cost on them, and are helping us along the way as well as everybody else. So we've got a large number of firms helping us. So to the best of our ability, we feel that we can solve many of the problems there. We will be applying for and have been applying for funds on outside bodies until we've got ownership of this building. That is difficult.
Thanks, Joe. Second question, Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, Joe, and thanks for all the work you guys are doing. And it's amazing to see how far, you know, Pēswhiri Kaipatiki has come in the last 6 years, is it now?
Yes.
So my question is, when you and I did a little tour around the buildings and the site, you had, you know, grand plans, and I've seen the plans. Have you scaled back any of that to begin with, just for the first couple of years, to get what you need on the ground so you can continue the work and not switch the focus too much away from the work you're all doing? While you're, yeah.
Yes, we're really conscious of that we can't actually divert staff time onto building time, because we need to continue the impetus that we already have underway. So what we have, with Naylor Love's help, actually got the essential items right up front. So we know that we've got 4 to 5 essential items that must be done before anybody could move into that building, and we will prioritise those. They're the first things that we're going for, and once we've got that, then we will be able to take things at a slower pace. So I don't think we've scaled it down, but we've certainly probably
prioritised.
We've prioritised it very, very strongly.
Perfect, and thanks so much again, Joe. And I'd like to second this. I see Chris has asked to move. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. And I just add my thought there that, I mean, what a fantastic example of a community, local business, private sector and council partnership to achieve what you're setting out to do, and just mobilising the community and doing such good work, and a beautiful area that you'll make even better. So thank you for coming along, and it's been moved by Councillor Chris Darby, seconded by Councillor Richard Hills, to receive your presentation and to thank you for it. And we could also thank you for the good work that you're being done. So I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I'll declare that carried unanimously. Thanks, Joe, and thank you for coming along and presenting to us today. Much appreciated. You're very welcome, of course, to stay online to hear the item when we get to it. It's item number 13, I think.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we come now to item number 7, which is local board input. And again, welcome John Gillen as chair of the Kaipātiki Local Board. And it's a hard act to follow, John, but yeah, welcome along, and love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Look, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for allowing Joe Knight to speak as well on behalf of Pest-Free Kaipātiki. You've heard an excellent presentation from her, and I'm sure you're all already convinced, but what I'm here to do today is to impart to you that the Kaipātiki Local Board is unanimously supportive of the application from PFK to take over the ownership of the Glenfield Bowling Club building and the lease of the underlying land at Ross Reserve in Glenfield. PFK do a fantastic job in our area, coordinating and empowering hundreds of volunteers and neighbours of reserves to look after our parks, catch rats, possums, remove weeds, plant natives, and provide education, stalls at school fairs and other events. And these activities are not only enhancing our public spaces, but bringing communities together. So we're seeing flow-on community development, networking, neighbourhood activities. But as PFK grow, one thing that they are lacking is an adequate home base, gathering space and storage space, as you saw from those photos. When the Glenfield Bowling Club folded and council inherited the building, the local board went through expressions of interest process and ultimately chose PFK as a successful applicant. And we granted them a lease for the land, and we also granted them ownership of the building because we mistakenly believed at the time that we had the authority to do that. Obviously we don't, and which is why I'm here today. It then went out for public consultation where there were no objections from the public or mana whenua. We truly believe that PFK has the ability and resources to fix up the building and turn it into a fantastic facility. We support them having the 2-year lease of the land to get the building up to scratch, or else it will come back to the council and then we can reassess what to do with it. The other option is if you choose not to allow the building to go to PFK, that we can demolish it, but that is at a cost of $150,000, which comes from your budget, not ours. We prefer to give PFK the opportunity to make something of this, and we see it as a win-win for council and PFK. So please consider this carefully, and I hope that you support us in transferring the building to PFK. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That was a really concise account, and what you say makes a whole lot of sense. So shall I get Councillor Hills to move this time and Councillor Darby to second? Oh, sorry, I see on my line Councillor Chris Fletcher wanted to move this one. So Councillor Fletcher to move, Councillor Darby to second, and I'll just open it up for questions. And I have a hand up, but I'm just trying to identify who that might be. Sorry. Oh, Councillor John Watson, thanks. Sorry, where your picture's not up, I just see a hand over the +35. John.
Well, at least it's not a red hand, Mr. Mayor.
Yellow hand, neutral.
First of all, John, I'd like to congratulate your board on the approach you've taken with this. This is an outstanding result. It's very sad always to see a community sports organisation disappear, but if you're going to have a replacement, we couldn't do better than Pest-Free Kaipātiki. My question, John, just as to the use of the reserve as a whole, and I caught a glimpse of the schematic, the wonderful schematic that Joe put up. Am I right in understanding then that not only will it be the base for Pest-Free Kaipātiki, but there'll be a potentially a passive or active recreation space for the local community too, somewhere in the environs of the leased land?
So PFK will be leasing the land under the building and also the former bowling green area. So, and I believe their intention is to allow public to gather there and to have events and that sort of thing. In the pictures that you've seen there, PFK, which is what PFK used as part of their application, they also applied for the use of the rest of the reserve. Now, the local board hasn't granted that at this stage. We want to see how they get on with the building and the bowling green area first. And in our resolution, we said that we are open to them coming back to us in the future for the other spaces as well. And I think they've got plans for a hedge maze for kids and that kind of thing. But we want them to concentrate on the building for the 2 years, get that sorted out, and then they can come back to us if successful.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Yep, thank you very much, John and John. Yeah, look, there are no other questions, so it has been moved that we receive the report from the Kaipātiki Local Board and to thank John Gillen for his presentation. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. And John, once again, thanks for coming along, and you're welcome to stay for item 13. May take us a little while to get there, but hopefully not too long.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you for that. So we move item 8 as extraordinary items. I hadn't been informed of any extraordinary items. Number 9, we come to our COVID-19 briefing. So I'm going to invite Phil Wilson to lead off, followed by Mace Ward. Now we have the full briefing on Tuesdays of all of our elected members, so we can probably deal with this in a reasonably concise manner, but feel free to, if you've got questions you'd like to have answered, to put those questions either in the sidebar or put your hand up. Phil, are you online with us? Would you like to lead off, please?
Ata Marie, tēnā koutou. Thank you, Your Worship. I will lead off. I'm joined by Paul Emerald, the Acting General Manager of Auckland Emergency Management, rather than Mace today. Apologies for that late change. Claudia Weiss is on the line, and Aleti Malemanu Kenneth Alapatia also with me, depending on where questions go, but I'll pass to them shortly if they have comments to make. As you say, I'll keep it reasonably short. I'm conscious that we have our regular Tuesday briefings, and of course we can follow up any detailed questions outside of this forum afterwards. Very happy to do so. I'll just give a broad sweep update for you, starting with a reminder that from an emergency management point of view, we do not have our emergency management apparatus activated formally in relation to this. The direction nationally is that we should focus that machinery on being prepared for other events that might come along, and therefore not consume all of its time on COVID matters now. However, and Paul will cover this, they are active in some regards in relation to welfare support. If I start at the high level, across Tamaki Makaurau, we have 4,639 active cases dispersed broadly around the region. A concentration, if you like, in the county's Manukau DHB area and in the Waitemata DHB area, but absolutely right through the region. No community is immune from this. We continue to have made good progress with vaccinations. I think you're probably aware of this, but just to remind, we have in the Auckland DHB area, the current state is 95% first vaxes, counties Manukau 92, Waitemata 93, and in terms of double vaccination rates, Auckland 91, counties Manukau 85, and Waitemata 88. So what we're seeing is those numbers closing up as we capitalise on the significant number of events around Super Saturday, and since then, with a real focus on getting those second vax shots, those people through the door in centres to hit and exceed the 90% level. Those numbers are still moving, thankfully. What is true within that is that there is a particular focus on Māori and Pacific communities, not uniquely so, but for obvious reasons in terms of trying to raise that second vaccination level in counties Manukau. That's where a lot of the activity continues to be. And just a reminder that those headline numbers tend to disguise a story underneath, which I illustrate by referring to Māori and Pacific numbers in the age group 20 to 34, where second vax numbers continue to lag a bit. For Māori, it's 68%, for Pacific, it's 78%. So good progress, but still some way to go, and hence the Northern Region Health machinery working with community providers, marae and such, are still very active in the community in this space, and your ongoing messages in terms of community leadership continues to be very welcome in that space. At the same time, the planning is advanced in terms of the rollout of boosters from the end of the month, from 29th of November, and obviously that needs to pick up on 6 months of post-second vaccination numbers in the community. So we've got, in a sense, to do this all again, and the machinery needs to keep mobilised around this in the community for quite some months in order to and not to let our guard down in terms of boosters. A reminder, if you weren't aware as well, that there is also consideration for the under 12 age group, and while that is, as we speak, still with MedSafe for approval, obviously the thinking going into next year will need to include community rollout of vaccination for that children's age group. Regionally, and by which I refer to the discussions across government agencies and others, I wanted to point to 3 things that are currently under a lot of discussion. One is the coordination of isolation, people isolating at home. Obviously, with the number of cases we have and the preference for those people to be home isolated, the wraparound support for them, both in terms of clinical support and in terms of meeting welfare needs, is a major focus across the agencies and requiring of quite some coordination. There's been a lot of work done to map that system and make sure that there aren't gaps and holes and handovers between agencies that don't work there. And this is still under discussion. I'll report back to you further, but we have been asked to support that in terms of continuing to stand up some, if you like, a call centre to simplify this, working with Ministry of Social Development to ensure that people have an avenue to go to in order to get quick support where they need it. And the reason we're particularly concerned about that, of course, is that in the absence for that home isolation group, those people might otherwise be out in the community and therefore increasing risk. The second area of discussion relates to the significant network of community providers that are providing welfare support to families. There is fatigue in that group. They've been hard at it for 100 days plus, and have been very stretched at times in terms of meeting the need with food parcels and other support. There's the planning that's happening now needs to contemplate the fact of those people having a break over the Christmas New Year period to recharge batteries, but of course families still requiring some support. So we're working on that. It's not a funding issue per se. There is good support from MSD and government more generally into that space. It's the logistics of having a lot of volunteers and a limited capacity to do the work on the ground. And the third thing in terms of what's concerning us regionally is the broader psychosocial, mental health, etc. area. There is some work going on with agencies to monitor that, to measure it, and quantify what it looks like, and then to put some support arrangements in place. Again, the police, in terms of domestic violence, and other agencies in terms of some of the other indicators here, are monitoring that carefully, and there is a need for us to ensure that the support arrangements are solid. Just talking quickly to the welfare space in a little more detail, we do have an issue getting very accurate data, because a lot of the community providers and marae and so forth are essentially bulk funded by agencies to do a body of work. And while there is some reporting back, of course, for accountability reasons, it's very hard to pull out a very up-to-date picture in terms of demands into that welfare space. But I thought I would just mention, to give you an idea of the scale of this, and several of you will know various of the players. South Seas is a significant provider in this space. They've just hit the 60,000 food parcels level through this 100-day period. It gives you, I think, an idea of the scale of the response from just one. That's a very significant provider, and they in turn support a number of other community organisations. But it's a staggering number in terms of demand in the community. We continue to meet weekly with Pacific providers, likewise with Māori providers, listening to them. I can't in good conscience tell you that this is empirically accurate, but they are saying that there is a slight reduction in the order of about 20% in terms of demands for the likes of food parcels. But we're doing more work to get that clearer. Of course, that's 20% reduction on a significantly elevated level, 5 to 6 times what they might normally have been providing pre-COVID times. They are concerned about the very long tail in terms of community need here, and obviously that's a focus. In terms of the organisation, we have pulled back, and satisfactorily so, I should say, in terms of some of our own food parcel generation to support folk here. We are maintaining some capacity to provide it where there's an acute sort of emergency need by one of the community providers, but we've refocused on supplying Food for the City mission and others, targeting, if you like, the particularly vulnerable in the community, and supporting some of the acute needs that come through the Northern Region health coordination effort. Very quickly, we are in contact. There are in relation to business and economy matters. We have a group that we participate in on border management, making sure that goods, services, and what have you can flow in a managed way across the border. We're involved also with MB and MSD and transport and others in a broader business group. So we're in close contact with business leaders, and as much as there is still some very acute concerns in the business community about the effects of this, that liaison is going very well. I just want to acknowledge, without going into detail, the Mayor's advocacy and the organisation's advocacy around ongoing business support, particularly targeting Auckland coming back on stream, if you like, in terms of tourism, hospitality, events, and the social interaction that is part of the fabric of the city. So there's some advocacy around some government support there. More news on that later. There's also advocacy in relation to the difficulty that Auckland Transport faces in terms of reduced public transport patronage and therefore revenues, and the risk therefore to not being able to sustain the same level of public transport services if we don't get a fix to some of the revenue problems there. So if I just turn to the organisation, and to remind you, if you weren't aware, we've been through an extensive consultation exercise with staff in terms of our own policies around vaccination. That's coming to a conclusion now. The executive team makes a decision next week on that. In parallel with that, we've been working through our policy settings in relation to customer access to our facilities and buildings. That is not landed yet, but is close. And we'll be confirming with you probably next Tuesday some of the progress with that. In fact, we've just been in a meeting immediately prior to this, working through that. And of course, separately, we've communicated with you about the elected member aspect of this. Claudia will touch on services, the resumption of and how we're managing risk in relation to that. We're in close contact with the CCOs. We met again with the CCO chief executives this morning. Probably what I would say is to reassure you that we're pretty well aligned. We're in slightly different places, given in each parts of the council whānau have good faith obligations to work these policies through with their staff. Auckland Transport's just going out with their broad staff consultation. Watercare, Eke Panuku, and Auckland Unlimited likewise are well progressed in this, and we're pretty well aligned. There are some unique aspects to this. Auckland Transport, for example, has some essential service obligations, such that they can't have a vaccine mandate for people using public transport by government direction. So there are subtle differences, but good alignment. Very finally from me, just a reflection on the organisation's in good shape. It's been a difficult period, you can imagine, with the substantial number of staff we have, that having everyone off site for 100 days plus has its challenges. We're monitoring and supporting in terms of staff well-being. There are issues here and there, but on the whole, I think our observation would be that staff have coped extremely well and very professionally. Of course, staff have an underlying concern. We had a pretty rough year last year with the emergency budget, etc., and therefore concerns about financial impacts and the long-term job security and what have you are there under the surface. But we've just completed some further engagement survey work that tends to indicate that staff are in quite good shape and in good heart. So that's a good state of affairs. I will pause and just ask Paul and Claudia and Kenneth to add in their areas as necessary. Perhaps Paul first.
Kia ora, Honourable Mayor, Councillors, Ko Paul Amaral Toko Ingwa. I'm new to Auckland Emergency Management. I'm in the acting General Manager capacity, and some of the councillors might know me from community facilities where I was the head of operations. Just to follow on from what Phil has said is, as is mentioned, on the 2nd of November, we moved to what we call a white activation in our COVID response. All it really means is that we move to a more business as usual response. All calls get triaged to our call center. And I talk under correction, but I think last week we had 4 calls that we received. So it's not a lot of calls, and it's manageable by the call center team. As Phil said, we just waiting on clarity to understand our role and responsibility in the self-isolation. We have been meeting with our National Emergency Agency to also see the challenges and what the other groups across New Zealand are doing. The information we're getting is that we will be more of a supporting role than a leading role. But obviously, if there's an outbreak, it will change, and the logistics expertise and skill set that we bring will be help the other agencies like the Ministry of Health and Social Development. We also continue to support our Northland counterparts with the border controls. Our team meets weekly with them, and business as usual is really good for the staff. My colleagues at AEM are fatigued. Besides the COVID response, they've had other 2 parallel responses that they've had to deal with. So just, I think they're also just looking forward to getting on top of the business as usual work, and also just having a bit of break. Some of them are looking forward to the booster jabs. Most were vaccinated in March, so they're looking forward to that. Obviously, the environment that we work in, that's important to them, and that's my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Claudia, I think you're online. I'm just checking.
Sam, kia ora koutou katoa, kia ora, Your Worship, councillors and members. It's lovely to see you here today, and congratulations, Councillor Hills, and happy birthday, Councillor Young. So just giving you a couple of really quick updates. I know you don't have much time. Probably the main focus I just want to discuss this morning is around the active recreation decision for pools and leisure regarding the vaccination requirements for customers. A memo came out yesterday morning that proposed that all customers going to our pools and leisure sites will require vaccinations. The reason for this is that under the COVID protection framework for both red and orange, our customers are required to have vaccinations if they are attending a gym and some of the other aquatics activities. The challenge is that our pools and leisure centres, however, are quite interconnected on other services too, where specific vaccination mandates are not needed. And because they are so interconnected, we cannot separate out the passage of customers between one site to another unless they're in very clearly distinct buildings. So what we have proposed, and this is the legal advice I received was that this was under my delegation, is that all of the services that are within one centre of the pools and leisure facilities will require those vaccine mandates. For services that have different access sites, so these do apply to a smaller number of our facilities, in those specific sites what we will do is block off the entrances between the pool and leisure centre and the other facilities such as a library, so that if the customer vaccination requirements for the library are different than those from the pool and leisure centre, that we can allow those customers to access via a different site and not prevent them from using our services. Those co-located areas apply to Toia Otahuhu, Otara Pool and Leisure and Te Matariki Clendon. So far, in terms of our vaccinations for other sites, this is a very, very complex topic, as I alluded to at the Tuesday elected member briefing. We are seeking advice from risk assessments, we're awaiting further guidance from the central government, and we're also seeking public health information. What we're doing is that for each of the public sites, we are having to look at a risk assessment model to understand how we can control and manage the risk for our customers. And we also need to understand our legal obligations under the Bill of Rights Act, but also under health and safety. The complexity of this cannot be understated, and our teams are working late into the night, as they have been for quite some time now, as we get further information from central government to really have a good, clear recommendation around what we might need to do in terms of mandating or not mandating vaccines for customers who use our services, aside from the ones that are mandated by the government. We are working at this at pace, and we are hoping that we can have detailed information on this available Monday or Tuesday morning so that we can discuss this further. I'm very happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia. I'll just invite Kenneth, if you're on the call, whether there's anything you want to add.
Morena, Your Worship. Thank you, Phil. Kia ora, councillors, elected members. My messages are really short, given the very brief amount of time. It's just to remind you that we are consulting on the elected member guidelines. Please make your submissions before next Friday. We've received 20 submissions so far. So given there are 160 or so, 170 or so elected members, we're really hoping that the numbers will pick up between now and next Friday. So I just implore you, we all know how important it is to have your say in a democratic process. And while this is not a democratic process, your views will help inform guidelines that will better shape our direction in this space. So thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thanks for your time, councillors, Your Worship.
Yeah, thanks, Phil and Kenneth and Paul and Claudia. That's really good. We'll have a couple of questions in a minute. I'll just put the motion of thanks at this stage. Happy for Councillor Sharon Stewart to move that. Do we have a seconder, please? Somebody like to indicate they'd like to second it?
Second, Your Worship.
Yeah, I think I think that was Pippa Coombe, if I got that correctly. Right, just very quickly on a couple of points that Phil raised. One, yeah, we are continuing to work with government on a small but I think welcome support package for Aucklanders, given what we've been through, which I think will focus largely around, promoting the city and promoting events in the city. And on the fare subsidy, I have been badgering Minister Michael Wood on that. It's obviously reasonably complex because it's taking time to get through cabinet, but I'm, we need to have some support, and the more support, the better. But I'm not quite sure at what level that will be yet. Okay, I'm just looking at questions. I've got Pippa Coombe with a hand up there, and looking for any other questions after Pippa. But Pippa, if you'd like to go first, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor, e mihi ana kia koutou, and thanks for the update. My partai is around the coordination of isolation, and particularly the information that's available. And I have raised this before, as I know, every community has got different needs about the information that they require to isolate. But I just wanted to clarify, particularly for the city centre residents who are in apartments and needing very specific information about isolating in apartments. And I just wondered if any progress had been made on bespoke information or resources for different communities and their different needs when isolating, or is that something that's being managed elsewhere, or something that Auckland Council can access those resources? Because I haven't seen them yet, but it has been a long-standing query. Kia ora.
Thank you for your, the question. We're well aware of that issue. We have escalated that to Northern Region Health, Councillor Coombe. I understand they have worked on this and generated something, but I'll need to check and feed back to you offline.
Thank you, appreciate that, and do appreciate all the tremendous work that's been going on with regards to the COVID response. Kia ora, thanks.
Thanks, Pippa, and thanks, Phil. Look, I don't have any other questions, so I think we'll move on at this stage unless there's something really pressing from anyone. We have reached 100 days of since we went into lockdown. It's been a long period, but hopefully we're seeing, that light at the end of the tunnel with the red light at the end of the tunnel actually at the moment, which will be just a week or so away, and then opening up before Christmas, and then interestingly that opening up for international visitors from about the second quarter of next year, but with all Aucklanders able to come home from overseas within the next couple of months. So some good things there, and we've come through that with so far 41 deaths, when if we were the United States, we'd be sitting on probably over several thousand deaths on a per capita basis. So there's something to celebrate and something to look forward to, because it has been trying, and it's been particularly trying for us as councillors when you look at the impact on our lost revenue and our increasing costs, which we have to deal with in the budget. So thank you very much, Phil, and your fellow presenters today. Much appreciated. I'll put the motion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And to the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Just before I move to the three items on bylaws, I'll just double check whether Joe Knight's on the line and waiting to hear item number 13, or John Gillen. If they are, we might move to that item first, but they may have gone off anticipating it will be a while. I can't hear from either of them, so I think we'll just keep to the agenda then. Item number 10 on the agenda is a decision on the proposed new public trading events and filming bylaw. And I'm going to get, first of all, acknowledge Paul Wilson, Magda Findlick and Sam Bunge as the advisors that are available. But I'm going to ask Linda Cooper to introduce it as the chairperson of the hearings panel. Linda, I might get you to move this item if you're happy with that, and maybe I'm just having a look at item number
maybe
10.
Councillor
Mulholland to second, if she'd like to. Yeah. So it's been moved and seconded, and I'll ask Linda to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So these are the panel recommendations to make a new public trading events and filming bylaw. And I'd like to thank very much Councillor Mulholland, Councillor Henderson and IMSB member Glenn Wilcox for their participation on the panel and their wisdom. So this report presents bylaw panel recommendations on the public feedback and local board views on the proposal to make a new public trading events and filming bylaw 2022. So the proposal was developed following a proper statutory bylaw review process, and it replaces the Trading and Events in Public Places Bylaw 2015, which expires next year. So the proposal sought to continue to regulate trading, event and filming activities to help minimise public safety risks, public nuisance and the misuse of council-controlled public places. So back in 27th of May, the governing body adopted the statement of proposal, and that went out to the public through several means: newspapers, Our Auckland and the People's Panel. It was promoted on social media, Screen Auckland networks, to including the Film Auckland and New Zealand Advertising Producers Group, which has 730 individuals and 1,700 followers. We had in-person and virtual presentations to the advisory panels and business improvement districts, and over 1,000 email notifications to industry stakeholders, etc. So public organisations, local boards had the opportunity to provide feedback in a variety of ways. And we had 78 people and organisations provide feedback. All 4 proposals received majority support, and you'll see the numbers there in the report. I won't repeat that. The panel deliberated and made recommendations on the public feedback and local board views on the 20th of October. So our recommendations are summarised in attachment A, but generally the recommendations support the intent of the proposal, recommend changes in response to matters including adding reference to other rules about filming and sale of alcohol, tobacco and weapons, extending the default duration of an approval to 24 months, currently 12 months unless otherwise specified. I understand that's actually for the mobility licenses, mobility devices, and clarifying which activities require an approval or not, including to exempt permanent art installations and filming of private celebration or event, current affairs and news, and to clarify that some commercial activities such as delivery of goods and outdoor fitness classes are generally not considered to be trading. So we ask that the governing body approve the panel recommendations and adopt the new public trading events and filming bylaw. And so I'll now, I think, pass over to Paul Wilson and Magda Findlick and Sam Bunch if they have any need to say anything else and address any questions from the governing body members.
Thank you, Linda. Paul, anything or your team would like to add to that?
Nothing further to add, Your Worship.
Yep, I think that's quite straightforward. So look, first of all, I'll ask if there's any questions on this. I want to acknowledge and thank the team, including Glenn, for their work on it. If there are no questions, are there any comments that anybody would like to make? There are no questions or comments, so I'll...
Sorry, Your Worship.
Sorry, Alf, Councillor Alf.
Your Worship, I just put in there when you said any questions, yes please, and I didn't want to hold up my hand just in case you tell me to go to the loo. So, but Your Worship, I just got one partai for Paul, and it's in regards to the item we're on around filming bylaw. Has this got any effect on the Tupuna Maunga Authority and what they're doing around filming on our maunga? Paul, please.
Thank you, through Your Worship, and I'll give Magda an opportunity to correct me if I get this wrong. No, it doesn't. The bylaw specifically only regulates land that is under the control of Auckland Council, and that does not include the maunga. They have authority to determine their own rules around filming and many other things around trading and events.
Kapai, and in regards to this bylaw, sorry, Your Worship, just in regards to this bylaw, was there any sort of at least consultation with around the bylaw with Tupuna Maunga Authority, so then our bylaw is not out of kilter with what the Tupuna Maunga are doing, even though they have authority over the maunga?
Yeah, I'll hand over to Magda, who can outline the consultation that was undertaken. Thank you, Magda.
through the chair. So there was no specific consultation with Tupuna because they are not a part of the defined council-controlled public place. However, during the initial engagement, we have looked at all the policies also that Tupuna has got on filming and make sure that there is a proper alignment between what council does and what Tupuna currently has got in place.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. Deputy Mayor Cashmore, question.
Yes, thanks, Linda, and thanks, Paul. My question is really about enabling of film work to carry on and not be hindered by an excessive bureaucracy. So perhaps Linda or Paul, was that any part of this discussion about making sure that that the film industry is not hampered unnecessarily?
I'll just answer it as the people that had the discussion, but Paul might be able to add that there's almost a separate process around landowner approvals, which the bylaw can't address. But we did discuss this because we're very mindful of the economic benefits to the Auckland region of the film industry. But we had a full discussion. However, we don't, there's under the Local Government Act, I think we need Paul to explain that, but basically there's landowner approvals to be had in regional parks. Staff manage that, and for some local boards get staff to manage that, and some local boards deal with their own applications. But maybe Paul needs to explain that a little bit better than I can.
Thank you. Through Your Worship, what the bylaw did was to continue the existing enabling framework. There's a lot of opportunities to potentially streamline the process, which is mainly governed under the Auckland Film Protocol, and this bylaw would continue to enable that to happen.
Thank you, Paul. There are no other questions or comments. I'd like to thank Councillors Cooper, Mulholland, Henderson and IMSB member Wilcox for their work on that, and our officers, of course. These things involve quite a long process and a lot of work, so really appreciate that you handle it so competently and smoothly. So I'll put the recommendations of essentially to approve the bylaws and adopt the new bylaw, revoke the old, distribute to local boards, and delegate authority to the chief through the chief executive if there's any changes needed. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. We come now to item number 11. Again, in the regulatory sphere, it's the decision on the proposed amendment to Animal Management Bylaw 2015, largely about beehives. And for those of you that are interested in this area, I know that there are members of our local boards that have contributed to the process with their expertise. Once again, if I can get Linda Cooper to move this, and maybe Kathy Casey to second. So moved and seconded, and I'll ask Linda to lead off and then ask if Paul or Sarah Lee have any comments they'd like to add to it. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we had myself, Councillor Kathy Casey and member Glenn Wilcox again, and thanks to them and our staff, Sarah Lee and Paul, for the work they've done. So this report presents the bylaw panel recommendations on public feedback and local board views on the proposal to amend the Animal Management Bylaw. The proposal was developed following a statutory review of the current bylaw, where the Regulatory Committee recommended the bylaw be amended. Really, this is about seeking to continue to regulate the keeping of animals in a way that minimises risks to public health and safety, nuisance, offensive behaviour and misuse of council-controlled public places. And the governing body again adopted this for public notification on the 27th of May. And the same process is used as the last item, very much put out to stakeholders, public, local boards, and any people we thought were particularly interested in this. There was a majority, 191 people and organisations fed back, and I just want to note that there was one item, it was basically just moving one item from the public safety and nuisance bylaw into the animal management. It was around the feeding of animals that are possibly unowned or congregate in your backyard or in public places. And there was no actual change to it, but it did activate quite a few people who were concerned about the fact that we might let cats starve, but that was not the case, or birds. It's no change. It was just really around, I just want to make sure this is addressed, because I think a lot of councillors got emails about this, but this was no change to the current approach. It was just not feeding animals in a public place to cause a nuisance. So it's not stopping people feeding maybe cats or other animals, as long as it didn't cause a nuisance in a public place. So just to allay anyone's fears that we were trying to harm animals, we were not. So we had 191 people and organisations feedback, and we had a very good local board feedback session and public feedback session, and we learnt a lot about good bee husbandry. And to that end, we recommended that we keep the numbers of beehives the same, just because the information we got back from people that are hobby beekeepers said that what we would do would make it difficult to look after bees in a safe and healthy way. So that's really the only thing we changed. So from the proposal, so there might be some questions on that. So we do ask the governing body approve the panel recommendations, adopt the changes to animal management bylaw shown in attachment C. And as again, I want to thank Councillor Casey and IMSB member Wilcox. And now we'll hand over to, I think Sarah Lee actually has a really good PowerPoint which kind of explains the beehive section of the bylaw. So I'll hand over to Paul and Sarah Lee.
Thanks, Councillor. So we've got this brief presentation. I'll then ask if Councillor Casey or Member Wilcox want to make any comments, and then I've got a couple of questions from councillors. So Paul, over to you and Sarah Lee for the presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to invite Sarah Lee to take you through the presentation. Are you there, Sarah Lee?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Paul. Through you, Ms. Chair. So, as Councillor Cooper mentioned, the proposal to limit the number of beehives on properties less than 2,000 square metres in urban areas was not seen favourable by beekeepers, and this was for a number of reasons. Firstly, the proposal looked to limit the inner dimensions of the beehive, and then what we heard, particularly through the local boards, especially the Howick and Papakura local boards, is that there is no real standard definition of what is considered a beehive. Beekeepers tend to add components to their hive depending on the season and the purpose that they're trying to achieve, so whether that is breeding bees or cultivating honey. So as you can see on screen, there's many configurations of what a beehive could be considered, and all of the examples on screen would be considered to be one hive. So by limiting the inner dimensions of a hive, we were potentially I guess hamstringing beekeepers to make their lives a little bit more difficult, which could impact on good beekeeping practices. Secondly, beehive numbers can fluctuate. So while 2 hives is largely considered to be the minimum needed for viable beekeeping across the beekeeping industry, more hives could be necessary for good bee management if a hive grows to a point where it needs to be split into 2 different hives, or if beekeepers notice what they call swarm cells, which means that there's not enough room in the hive for the bees, and they're likely to be swarming, which is generally considered to be one of the key causes of bee-related nuisance. And also, if there's a swarm identified by the public that needs to be caught, that could be then created into a new hive. So while 2 is the minimum, more than 2 is often needed to make sure that bees are kept in a manner that doesn't cause a nuisance. So to that effect, the panel decided that the existing controls in the animal management bylaw are sufficient to minimise nuisance, which is the main objective. So looking at things of the position of hives and also their flight path, maintaining a calm temperament, controlling swarms and enabling them to access water would be the best mechanisms to continue to regulate bees and minimise bee-related nuisance. Thank you.
Sarah Lee. That was a great presentation. We learn all sorts of things in this job. So we're now all well informed about beekeeping in a way we weren't before. I'll just double check. Councillor Casey or Member Wilcox, do you want to add anything? Otherwise, I'll go to questions. Just no? Yes?
Just for me,
Member Wilcox.
Mr. Chair. I think the thing that amazed me with this bylaw hearing was the amount of knowledge that was held within our local boards concerning beehives. I was just amazed, and I learned more in that 3 hours about beehive than I ever knew before. So I'd just like to say that, and hats off to the local boards for the presentations. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just one more comment, because I know that there was quite an incident in the Hibiscus Coast, and we discussed that very fully. But what transpired was that it ended up that it was actually a commercial bee operation, and so that was dealt with under the unitary plan. But what we're really dealing with here is our hobby bees, our people that want to have backyards or urban beekeeping. So there is provision in the unitary plan to manage commercial beekeeping, and that issue in the Hibiscus Coast was dealt with under that rule.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Casey, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, just to say, absolutely agree with my colleague Glenn that the Papakura local board and the Howick local board gave an amazing presentation. Both boards had beekeepers on them, and it was really beekeeping 101, and I really appreciate it. But the other thing I wanted to say was, Glenn and I were both on the first animal management bylaw. And what is very apparent to me is that we've come of age in terms of our bylaws. Both they are mature, they are absolutely professionally drafted and presented, and I can't comment highly. I can't comment more highly on the staff that support us. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Linda, for your efficient chairing. Excellent work. One of the highlights.
So we'll come to questions, and I have one question at the moment. Councillor John Watson. John.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it is indeed to do with the situation on the Hibiscus Coast, which has been ongoing for any number of years now. I've lost count. It must be at least 3 years. And I'm looking at point 17, where the decision to reject proposal 1 in terms of requiring approval to keep more than 2 standard beehives, and the notion that the issues on the Hibiscus Coast can be dealt with in terms of existing controls. Now, I appreciate the clarification that just given from Councillor Cooper, but I just had a complaint a couple of weeks ago from the same people in the same location, the same thing that's happening with respect of this bee poo, which on the face of it might seem vaguely amusing, but it's not for these properties in terms of the effects on their cars, their windows, the expense that they have to get this stuff removed. So it's clear to me that the existing controls aren't dealing with the issue, because I just heard about it a couple of weeks ago. So I'd appreciate from the officer, given that the Hibiscus Coast situation seems to have had some airing during the hearing, as to what those existing controls have done, given the complaints have started up again.
Thanks, Councillor. Paul or Sarah Lee, could you address that question, please?
Yes, thank you, and through your worship. Yes, the issue of the bee poo in particular, also the swarms, was a matter during the bylaw review that we focused on quite heavily, and that was one of the reasons why the proposal was notified as it was. What the panel had deliberated on when it went through the process was really to establish that the proposal that was put out there wouldn't resolve the issues that individuals face any better than the current provisions, but it would have some unintended consequences for good practice beekeeping by hobbyists. So that was one of the reasons why the proposal has been recommended to be removed. So council enforcement staff really acknowledge that the current rules are hard. It is difficult to address these situations. But again, the decision or the recommendation before the governing body is that those current rules are the best we think we have available to us at this time, and certainly the proposed ones wouldn't help these individuals, but would have a disproportionate effect on the responsible hobbyist beekeepers. Thank you.
Okay, so just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, so thank you for that answer, and it is a good answer, but it doesn't really help councillors in my position where we're told that the existing controls are the mechanism by which the issues that I'm concerned about will be dealt with, but they're clearly not, and as Paul said, that there are difficulties with it. So it presents an awkward position for people that were looking for this this bylaw to be the means by which these ongoing issues, and I mean this has been on 7 Sharp, it's had quite some extensive exposure in the national media even, but the particular situations in terms of the damage that's been done, the swarms, the antisocial behaviour, doesn't seem to be any nearer to being resolved. I understand the point that's been made in terms of what's been proposed here, but that doesn't really go to addressing these ongoing concerns, which is unfortunate. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Paul, did you want to make any further comment on that? If I understand it right, and I may not have, this deals with hobby beekeepers and not with commercial, and the problem may be coming from commercial, which is dealt with differently. Is that correct, or have I got that wrong?
That is correct from the case that Councillor Cooper was talking about, and I didn't have anything further to add. Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson, you might like to take that matter up further offline if there's something further you'd like to pursue on it. Councillor Desley Simpson, I think, has the next question.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's 2 questions of clarification, and it's around people who feed stray cats on public land. Councillor Cooper mentioned that there was no change except for when they caused I think you used, correct me, Linda, if I got this wrong, a nuisance. And I just wondered if it was the cats that caused a nuisance or the people feeding them caused a nuisance, or what is the actual clarification around that? Could someone please give me the answer to that, please?
Thank you. Through you, Worship. So just to clarify as well, the clause that was being transferred from the property and maintenance and nuisance bylaw, and the rule was basically saying that if you are going to feed animals on your private property, you must make sure that that does not cause a nuisance to the wider public. So specifically, this rule was actually mainly used in instances where people were feeding large numbers of birds, like in the hundreds, and that caused a nuisance to their neighbours in terms of the bird feces. And so this was one of the examples of where that bylaw is used. And so the decision was made to transfer it into this bylaw, just so the public could more easily find it, rather than having it in the property maintenance and nuisance bylaw. So there was no change to the actual rule itself. With regard to the feeding of animals in public places, and that could be anything from the pigeons or even the eels and the ducks, that is actually something that is covered under the Public Safety and Nuisance Bylaw. And again, it's one of those issues where you can, so long as that doesn't cause a nuisance. typically the nuisances that are dealt with are things where people are overfeeding, and so it becomes waste or litter, or that it's causing detriments to the other users in the public place, for instance, to water quality in Western Springs Lakes. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, is that satisfied?
Yes, I was really referring to cats, and my answer was about birds and other things, but I think I've got this. So there's no change to what's currently allowed with regarding cats, is what I took from that answer. Thank you.
Okay, that's good, thanks. I have no further questions. Do I have any comments? If not, I'll put the resolution, which is to adopt the amended bylaw and the other aspects of the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
I'd just like my opposition to proposal 1 finding, if that's possible, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the rest. If it's not, then I'll vote against it all. But I'm happy to go with just that getting recorded if that can be done. Proposal 1.
Okay, we'll record that. I'll ask Sandra to record that.
And if you could record my abstention on that particular part.
Okay, those two will be recorded. I don't think I've finished putting the recommendation. Those opposed say no. I declare that carried with 2 councillors noting their concern about the item that they have referred to. Right, we come now to the third of our regulatory committee recommendations, and this is the proposed amendments to the Water Supply and Wastewater Network Bylaw. Councillor Cooper, I'll ask you to move this. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second it. Councillor Newman.
Councillor Newman, seconded. Can I acknowledge the other members of the hearing panel, member Glenn Wilcox once again. Glenn, you're probably the most hardworking member from the IMSB. And we also had Catherine Harland, who was the appointee from Watercare, and most of you will know Catherine. And we have here, as well as Paul Wilson, Sharon Danks and Mark Bourne from Watercare. So, Linda, I'll ask you to introduce it, and then I'll ask officers if they'd like to speak to it before we move to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So this report presents bylaw panel recommendations on public feedback excuse me, and local board views on the proposal to amend the Water Supply and Wastewater Network Bylaw 2015. The proposal sought to continue to protect the water supply and wastewater networks from damage, misuse, interference, and better assist in providing reliable, safe and efficient water and wastewater services in Auckland. The governing body adopted the statement of proposal for public notification on the 25th of February 2021, and public consultation occurred from the 8th of June this year to the 16th of July. And the usual processes of public organisations and local boards had the opportunity to provide feedback in a variety of ways, including online, email, post, phone and in person. 46 people and organisations provided feedback. All 3 proposals received majority support. 70% proposal 1, 79% proposal 2 and 76% in favour of proposal 3. 20 local boards provided views by resolution and 2 gave views at the local board deliberation session on the 5th of November. And the panel deliberated on the 5th of November, and the recommendations support the intent of the proposal, and recommended changes in response to matters raised include adding a reference to the Fire and Emergency New Zealand Act 2017 to clarify the rights of Fire and Emergency New Zealand to take water from hydrants for firefighting purposes. They wanted that clarified. Clarifying what prohibited waste is and what can and cannot be discharged to wastewater. A network, for example, disposable wipes, unused pharmaceuticals, plastic bags, paints and solvents. And we know the issues that are caused with things like fatbergs and the wipes, so-called disposable, but they're not disposable. Actually, what we said was any wipes, not just disposable. improving the definitions, for example, of groundwater and private water supply for the ease of understanding, and providing links to codes and operational standards. I want to thank the panel, Catherine Harland and IMSB member Wilcox, but also very much thank our staff and Watercare staff, Sharon and Mark. And we will hand over to Paul and I've lost the plot there. Paul, thank you.
Sharon or Mark there too as well. Catherine or Glenn, anything that you'd like to add to that before I go to officers? No, you're fine. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was pushing the wrong button.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Member Wilcox.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that water is an important part of Māori psyche, and in items 24 to 30, in paragraphs 24 to 31, we've reinforced those views and how they've impacted and how they impact on Māori and the impact of this bylaw. The resulting kōrero is a real thank you to the staff and to fellow panel members, because we've gotten better and we think a lot differently now to when we first did these kaupapa. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Kia ora, Glenn. Thank you for that. Catherine, welcome along. Good to see you again. You'd like to make a comment as well.
Yes, I'd just like to acknowledge Linda in terms of chairing and Glenn, but also the staff in terms of pulling it together, and echoing Councillor Casey's earlier comments about, as the bylaws have progressed through the years, there has been greater clarity and certainty provided, and the making it simpler for people to understand is very important. And I think this further iteration goes a long way towards that, and it just echoes how important these bylaws are for protecting our environment. So thanks for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much. Now, anything from Paul or Sharon or Mark that they'd like to add before we go to questions?
Nothing from me, Your Worship. Sorry, Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Paul, anything from you?
My apologies. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to acknowledge the hard work by the review panel and just reiterate Catherine Harland's comments relative to the importance this bylaw places in protecting the water and wastewater services of Tamaki Makaurau. So thank you for the hard work, review panel.
Thanks, Paul. Sharon, anything from you?
Good morning, Worship. No, nothing from me at this stage.
Thank you very much. So we come to the first question is Councillor Wayne Walker, followed by Councillor Pipakoon.
Sure. So I've got a question. It's not at all at odds with the bylaw, which is really great, but the related issue that I've raised at a number of meetings that go to protecting the water supply and waste network and wastewater networks is around the contract between Watercare and the people that buy the water. They can be residential people, equally they can be commercial and industrial. And the suggestion that I've been putting that in the contract there's a requirement around the particular industry, for example, having industry best practice, and that we develop that. Other cities have gone there. What this enables is it means that there's an emphasis on water conservation, because as it stands now, we have nothing to prevent a water user wasting as much water as they want. Absolutely nothing, as far as I know. And as far as products going into the wastewater, there are many other products in addition to what we're covering off here, nanoplastics and other things. The generation of chemicals on an ongoing basis is phenomenal in terms of new chemicals. So yes, fully supportive of these amendments, but my question is around whether this consideration has been taken up because it could have very real effect. It doesn't require a bylaw. It simply requires some work on the part of Watercare. So a question there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark or Sharon, would you like to address that question?
Thank you, Worship. I'll address the question in the first instance, and Sharon may have some further detail to add. Just with regards to industry best practice, I think some firm direction will be coming through from Council on that through the development of the water strategy, setting up expected per capita consumptions for both industrial, commercial and domestic consumers. That's probably place for that to be formed rather than in the bylaw itself. And just with regards to the discharge of prohibited waste, there is a section that covers that specifically within the wastewater network section of the bylaw. It's also covered in a greater level of detail within the trade wastes bylaw. And within the trade wastes bylaw, it specifies prohibited wastes, and those prohibited wastes are non-exclusive to just trade waste entities. So those prohibited wastes also include discharge from any location. That is a non-exclusive list that's covered in there. So the advent of nanoplastics and other emerging contaminants of concerns can be covered through that process.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll come to a question from Councillor Pipacoon.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. Thank you everybody who's done all this fantastic work on the bylaws. I do appreciate that it's a big job. Mark has sort of touched on my partai. I just wanted confirmation that this amendments in the bylaw are consistent with the water strategy and going further, obviously, that it's actually complementary to the water strategy, and just any examples of how they will work together, if that's possible.
Your Worship, if I take that question, I think they are complementary and they're certainly not contradictory. So the two will work in tandem. The primary purpose of this bylaw is to protect the water and wastewater system, particularly from external forces, whether they be tampering or from other parties undertaking activities nearby or on the assets, rather than the direct use of water and wastewater services, which is really where the water strategy will come in over the top.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question from me. I mean, we've talked about disposable wipes being a big problem for quite a long time, but it seems to me while we can prohibit the placing of them in the system, enforcing that prohibition's a whole lot harder. Do you have any ideas of, other than education, of course, I mean, is there any way that you can detect who is doing that and therefore have any realistic chance of imposing a sanction?
I can probably answer that one, Your Worship. We do when we have blockages in the networks, which are often caused by whites and fats, we do try and analyse if there's anywhere in particular it's come from, especially in relation to larger users. But generally, it's quite hard if it's just an accumulation of residential users. So potentially a way of dealing with this might be advocacy to national government to see if we can get these type of items banned to some extent. Yep.
Yeah, that seems to me more realistic as an approach to maybe that's something that Paul, our officers, could think about, and maybe we could advocate that to central government that they move to prohibit disposable wipes that are actually not disposable. Question, Councillor Richard Hills.
apologies, Mayor. It was probably more just a comment that we had met with the wipes companies and the supermarkets and Watercare and Healthy Waters a couple of years ago, and it is very difficult. I guess and sorry, you can probably hear Theo in the background. The wipe situation is that the flushable wipes, the legality behind it is that they are flushable. The issue is that the infrastructure cannot handle them. So it's a circular argument that's very, very confusing. So the main issue is removing the flushable from those products, because they're definitely not flushable, even though they are, if you know what I mean. And it's very confusing, an international problem. You're probably not going to get rid of the other wipes, but maybe a campaign. We need to head off another campaign on that. I managed to get Countdown to put warning labels on the shelves saying these are not flushable, despite them saying flushable. But it would be nice if they just took them off the shelves altogether.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's very helpful. I think you'll be getting to know a bit more about disposable wipes in the near future. Member Wilcox, question or comment?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, in response to your question. One of the things that did come out from the local boards, particularly the Howard local boards, was that a lot of the instructions or brief summaries of these bylaws are only in English, and there was a definite need to, within these educational pamphlets or educational material, to include other language that is spoken in Auckland. And perhaps that's another way to deal with the problem of these wipes going down the loo. So I just thought I'd point that out, that this was a submission from particularly the Howard local board about the lack of other languages in our educational brochures. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Member Wilcox. I think, I appreciate Councillor Hill's comments about the difficulties there, but we may just need to ramp up our efforts and, think about how we can educate people, or at the very least, stop them being called disposable wipes, in the sense that you think you can dispose of them down the toilet. Okay, I have no further questions or comments. So I'll put the recommendations.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I did have a final
Cooper,
comment, if I could,
yeah,
to close. Sorry, thank you. And I'm only doing it because it's the end of the year and it's been a long year for our community social policy staff. And I want to absolutely thank Paul and his team, Katoraina Maki, for the work they've done. They've just soldiered through all of the lockdowns. They've modified the way we've got feedback in. They've done a huge amount of work, and I want to thank them very much. Also, our CCOs that we work with, particularly Watercare on this one, and just say we've still got a few to work through before the end of the year. However, I just want to thank and all the people that have been on the panels, fellow councillors, IMSB members that have been on the panels, because it's been a sterling effort. Even though we've been isolated at home, we've worked really well together. So thank you very much to all of them.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, and I think we'd all endorse your comments on that. Okay, so I'll put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Now we come to item number 13, which is the item that we had two presentations on this morning. And just to acknowledge the message I got that Joe Knight is still on the line. So Joe, this is just so you can hear the proceedings. This is not the area for participation in it, but thank you for being so patient, and thank you for your presentation again this morning. I'm going to, first of all, just get this to be moved and seconded. Maybe Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby would like to move and second that. We have been well briefed on that now, but we have Philippa Carroll, Pip, and Yusuf Khan as our officers here. So Pip, is there anything that you want to mention by way of introduction before we proceed to questions and comments?
Oh, Marina, Your Worship and Councillors, thank you for your time. I think Joe Knight and John Gillen covered off most things. We also presented other options to the local board, which didn't really go down that well. One was to divest the land, but 3 of the 4 land parcels at Ross Reserve are Crown owned, demolish the building. And we did get a full building assessment done and detailed costings, but when it came in at over $650,000, that was no longer an option due to constraints in the budget. And also just to acknowledge Joe Knight from Pest Free Kaipāriki, when we went out to an expressions of interest, they submitted a very comprehensive application that came with detailed project plans and costings, which is also to be covered by voluntary professional hours and materials. And as you can see, Kaipāriki Local Board then granted an agreement to lease and lease with the gifting of the building. Staff also support the local board's recommendation to gift the building because under our current guidelines, a tenant-owned building is entitled to a 10 plus 10 year lease as opposed to a 5 plus 5, which is a council-owned building. And we feel that Pest Free Kaipāriki's effort and work to bring the building up to standard is fair that they get a 20-year lease. And as echoed by Joe this morning, it's easy for them to get sponsorship and funding if the building is owned. And from council's viewpoint, it helps us to build relationships that are more reflective of being a partnership with local boards and local communities. And also, just from a purely monetary point of view, this will stop any future liabilities for council, as if we own the building, we are still liable for maintenance and ongoing costs. And also just to note that council definitely support the inclusion of point B, and this just helps clarify the situation, which will also be reflected in the legal documentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pip. And I've, as chair, I've accepted the amendment that has been moved by a councillor on B, which just reinforces your point. Not that there was any expectation, I think, given from the Pest Free Kaipāriki group, but as a precedent for the future, if there's any other transfers, I think it's a good principle to build in. So I've got a number. I'll do questions first, and I've got a number. The first is from Councillor John Watson.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And this is one that just really arises out of the commentary around point 17 in terms of compensation for improvements to the club, and it's very clear, of course, that there is none. But what I was keen to find out was, going back to 2019, what the status of the Glenfield Bowling Club membership was at that time, and I guess their sense of what it meant, basically giving up this this facility that they'd founded themselves, put a very substantial building on. Was that all quite amicable and a matter of course, or was there any sort of residual kind of attempt or concern that they might keep going? What was the history to that point in 2019?
Hi. Yeah, the club had wound down to about 10 or 12 members, and the president of the time was very helpful and lovely, and he was there was no animosity. They were really good in helping us get the building ready, as was New Zealand Bowls to sell on. The members dispersed to other bowling clubs. No, I kind of got to meet them about 2018, and it was all very mutual and amicable, and they were all very helpful. And they just realised that the club had just sort of run its course, and just acknowledged that with all the opening of the new retirement villages, they also have bowling facilities in them. And yeah, but no, there was definitely no animosity from our side or theirs that I'm aware of.
Okay.
They were very helpful.
Good, thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I just would note that 40 years ago, when I was first elected in Parliament, the bowling clubs and the RSAs were the most important institutes in the community, and both for reasons of ageing population kind of faded away, which is sad in its own right, but that reflects just a change in what people's interests and preferences are for. But good to hear that that was all done amicably. Next question is Councillor Pipacoom.
Oh, thank you. And very, very keen to support this. I just think it's fantastic to see what's come together and the opportunity that's here, and the community getting behind this with the local board. Yes, just really fantastic project. My partai is sort of looking at the bigger picture and is perhaps directed to the Chief Executive, and whether there's a learning for us in terms of council getting out of the way and tapping into the resources of the community, and whether this is perhaps a template for looking at other projects that might be on the books that have stalled because there isn't the funding or might need to be deferred. And as an example of that partnership, perhaps if there isn't a response now, putting on the spot, but I do feel that this really is an example of what is possible when council does get out of the way, and no doubt the final cost of a big restoration would be a lot more than almost $600,000, but just the opportunity too for sponsorship and co-funding.
Oh yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Coombe. And I note the comments you made in the meeting the other day, consistent with the question that you asked. And I agree that there's potential for this as a template for other situations that are similar. That said, I think every situation would need to be evaluated on its own merits with respect to the property, its condition, the options for dealing with it. But this sort of arrangement, I'm sure, should be considered as an option where circumstances would allow. So I'll be making sure that that is fed back through our community facilities team.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive, and just best wishes to the Pest-Free Kaipariki team taking on this big restoration work. Fantastic to see. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. The last question I've got is from Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. So my question and comment just follows right on from Councillor Coombe. I think that it's a critical requirement for us to change the template, because if things have tracked according to the officer advice, this building would have been demolished at some cost and a huge opportunity lost. In this instance, we have an opportunity to, one, retain a building, but two, to acknowledge the phenomenal work that this particular group is doing that would otherwise be paid for by council, probably saving us hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So there's a really critical need to alter the circumstance here. And my question that goes to this further is, we had a workshop, I think it was just yesterday, around the consideration of leases for community organisations and rentals. And part of that was around propositions to increase the charges to community groups. I think that this particular example here indicates that a peppercorn rental is entirely appropriate, and in fact we should actually be giving them money, but we're not. So I have a question around how this relates to the process that's underway around consideration of rentals and leases, and obviously the related point around the necessity to change our policy in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, would somebody like to answer that question?
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to respond to that.
The Chief Executive is one of our officers, so yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. A little bit in line with my response to Councillor Coombe. I think you know, it's not possible for me to give a kind of a global response to say that in every circumstance we will find a solution that's just like this. But what I could say is that we will make sure that when we are faced with circumstances such as this, we will look for opportunities that include this kind of option as an outcome. Again, I couldn't give an undertaking that we'll always find one, but I think it's worth reflecting on this model and the extent to which it's successful in these circumstances, and looking to make sure that this option is evaluated when similar circumstances prevail in the future.
Thank you very much for that. So we come now to comments. First comment from Councillor Richard Hills.
And kia ora, and thank you all again, and thanks to the officers for not only this report, but all the work that's gone into this over the last, I think it's about a year. And obviously, thank you so much to the local board, Kaipatiki local board, John Gillen and team, for backing PFK, and for Joe Knight and the team. Pest-free Kaipatiki started through the Kaipatiki Restoration Group that I think started in 2009-ish. It was a small group, including Joe Knight, of very keen volunteers. We used to meet in the Northcote War Memorial Hall on cold nights with soup and other things with the Kaipatiki Community Facilities Trust, and it was all about doing as much mahi on the ground as possible, but with small numbers and big vision. In 2015, they pushed hard to create Pest-free Kaipatiki, worked with us when I was on the Kaipatiki local board, and have continued to grow and grow and grow. And from that small number of volunteers is now right across Kaipatiki with hundreds of volunteers, halos in almost every community, working in 160 reserves. Is just phenomenal, the amount of work that's done. We do help support them with regional funding. The Kaipatiki local board also give them quite a decent amount of funding as well, and they get funding from Birkenhead Licensing Trust and many other ways. But they use that, for what they do, with it's quite a small amount of funding in the end of the day compared to the amount of work they do. So that volunteer, those thousands of volunteer hours every year and everything, the value they're putting into our parks and reserves, we couldn't actually do on council funding through our contracts. We just couldn't get that amount of work done. So this will step up another massive amount for our community and support communities around the shore in Auckland as well, and will help continue to bring the birds back, get rid of weeds, get rid of rats and stoats and everything else that we experience across Tamaki Makaurau, and it's just phenomenal work, and it's part of the many groups that have popped up over the last decade or so across Auckland. So it's just fantastic work, and what we have put there in B, it's acknowledging that as a council, and we're seeing it now again with COVID, we just do not have the funding for those extra renewals. We cannot take on these old buildings and continue to have that liability for the region. So Chris and I and the local board are very supportive of Pest-free Kaipatiki taking over this building, but also working, as they've done already, in innovative ways to get that funding, to get that support, but not rely continually on the ratepayer, because we already know that our current council buildings are in much need of that renewal funding. So I think this is a good deal for the community and a good deal for us, and just want to hope that everyone supports this. But yeah, fantastic work by all, and thank you very much. And I'm sure we will all be there for the first stage of the opening after the team have got it upgraded, and all that volunteer work and continual restoration work will continue along while the site is being used in a much better way. And thank you for the comments about the bowling club. It was very amicable, and it's been done in a very good, positive, constructive way as well. Those members knew that it was time to move to other clubs and have the better use for the space. That wasn't just for 10 to 20 members, as we've seen in many bowling clubs across Auckland that can happen. So I want to thank them as well, and there's a really positive history there that I'm sure Pest-free Kaipatiki will continue to celebrate as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hills. Councillor Chris Darby.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hills has covered most points really, really well, but I do want to acknowledge Pest-free Kaipatiki and Joe Knight helming that organisation. Also John Gillen and the Kaipatiki local board for shepherding this through. Working an issue through like this where you're staring at a massive liability and coming out the other side with just a really good outcome is fantastic. So hats off to the board and Pest Free Kaipatiki for this, along with our staff also for, having the willingness to, look towards a really good outcome. So Pest Free Kaipatiki today, they've confirmed that they're not here, with coming cap in hand. They've got great commercial relationships already in place, and it's just so refreshing to see that. And John Gillen and I witnessed that at a recent planting where Pest Free Kaipatiki were leading the day, and Naylor Love, a big construction company here on the North Shore, operating right throughout New Zealand, were manning the barbies and contributing, and as were other companies as well. So good outcome here, and I would say the birds of Birkenhead, Birkdale, Northcote, Glenfield, etc. will be singing praise of this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be quick, but I think what's transpired here this morning is of sufficiently positive significance to merit a few comments, and I'm happy to do that. In the first instance, in respect of Pest Free Kaipatiki, whose influence goes way beyond just the confines of Kaipatiki or the North Shore. They go over to the Albany ward as well, so they do a huge amount of work. And when I saw that visual of the people crammed into the little room there, then what clearly more space is going to make a very significant difference for the ability of their work to expand beyond what they're even doing now in that immediate area that we saw. As far as building on community assets, and I regard the Old Glenfield Bowling Club as a community asset, what is particularly pleasing from my point of view is the manner now in which it's reinventing itself. So it served what was, a new suburb, Glenfield in the 1960s, one of the first new suburbs on the North Shore of the Nappy Valley, I think they used to call it. Now it's finding its way as a use for an environmental centre for the considerably, not just the local community, but particularly the schools, the young people that live in the area, which it is very well positioned for. So this is an excellent location in terms of centrality, not just for Glenfield, but for those other surrounding suburbs. So it's very easily accessible. In this respect, I'm very impressed by the leadership of the Kaipatiki local board here, who have saw an opportunity, have been reasonably adamant in terms of their own view of how this space could be best used going forward, and credit to the officers that they obviously have seen that possibility and have been willing to advance that. The net result of this is quite distinct from other instances where I know in my own ward where buildings have been destroyed, just the bulldozers put over them, and they've been left vacant for years and years. In this instance, we have a group that's doing a lot of work, which has secured what appears on the face of it to be some pretty substantial investment, and probably will proceed at a pace that's in excess of what is normally the case in terms of building and planning and all the the due diligence that gets done. So I just think, and Councillor Walker made this point, as a blueprint for the future, this is an excellent example. It's uplifting. It provides not just for the immediate future, but for the long-term future. So we're now 2020. The community's had the best part of 70 years use of this facility for a recreational pursuit. Going forward, who knows what length of time we're going to have now for any number of environmental benefits, and if ever there's a time for considering the environment, it's now. So I genuinely take my hat off to all those people concerned, in particular Pest Free Kaipatiki and the Kaipatiki local board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and just some brief words from me. I think this is the right solution from a community point of view, in the value that the Pest-Free Kaipātiki Restoration Society clearly is adding to its community and its ability to build those coalitions with the private sector and with council. So I congratulate them on the work that they've done. I congratulate the local board on seeing the opportunity that exists there. I do note the qualification by our chief executive and agree with that it won't be a case of this being the solution every time. Sometimes when we have community facilities that are derelict, the answer will be to demolish them and to sell the property. But in this case, there was an exceptionally strong argument that the best way forward financially and the best way forward from the community's perspective was to do what these recommendations actually achieve. I think that we'll get great value out of the buildings through their use by Pest-Free Kaipātiki, and it means that effectively the council has been saved $150,000 in demolition costs for a piece of land that I think is very suitable for the purpose for which it will now be put. So once again, to Jo, if she's still on the line, I think she will be, congratulations to you and all of your members. If you can pass on our thanks as a council for the great work that you do on behalf of the community over on the shore in Kaipātiki. And it's now time to put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no.
Aye.
I declare that carried, and I think unanimously. Right, we come now to item number 14, and this is.
Happy to move.
Yep, I'll be happy to accept the local ward councillor Pippa Coombe as the mover. Do I have a seconder for it, please? I'll jump in and second that. I'm very happy to do that. This is pretty much an administrative measure that requires, with the resignation of Leanne Namani from our planning committee and her replacement by Tau Henare, to change the role in terms of the committee, decision-making committee for the Waiheke area plan, and it's very straightforward. But I'll ask Michelle Perwick if she's got any comments that she would like to add to that. Michelle.
Not really. It's a very straightforward administrative matter, just ensuring that because we had specifically named Leanne Namane, we need to name her replacement. To ensure we don't have this problem again, we've also ensured that the IMSB has the option of providing an alternate in the future if Mr. Henare is not available.
Thank you. Yep, and that's a sensible addition as well. So I'll just check if there are any questions. If not, are there any comments? No.
You say the question in the sidebar, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
I'm
not
probably
quick
didn't
enough.
put my little hand up.
Yeah, Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, it was just given that in most appointments of IMSB to anything we do, quite often we won't put a name, we'll just put an IMSB member, and it's up to the IMSB to decide, as is their right to do. I'm just wondering why we have to name, because this could happen again in the future, and that it could just be a member of the IMSB as appointed, rather than naming. I'm just wondering why you would put, because this can happen again, rather than just, if this happens again, it can be automatically changed by the IMSB and possibly approved by the local board.
Michelle, any thoughts on Councillor Cooper's suggestion?
Councillor Cooper is correct. It should have been an alternate, an appointment made by IMSB directly. But because we had gone down this route and IMSB member Henare has been appointed, it seemed appropriate to put his name. But as I said, we have already included the provision that if this should happen again, we already have the replacement clause, which allows for the IMSB to nominate an alternate. So we don't need to come back to you again. And going forward in future, we'll make sure that we follow that process.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I get that there's an opportunity for the alternate, but you've got the primary person as a member nominee, but it's the ability to change the alternate. That's, I guess you're not going to do this from now on, but yeah,
I think it covers the contingency you mentioned, that I guess you have to name, because you're replacing member nominee, you have to indicate that you're replacing with member Henare, but it also says, or an alternate board member as appointed by the Independent Maori Statutory Board. So I think it covers your point. We would not have to come back to this committee to spend time in this committee, not much time, admittedly, if a person stands down and needs to be replaced. So, okay, that's good. Are there any other comments? I'm just happy for Councillor Dalton to second that recommendation. I'm sorry I didn't hear you put your name forward, Councillor Dalton. So replace my name with Councillor Dalton's. If there are no comments, I will put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. Item number 15 is a summary of memoranda that is being released and progress on the forward work program. So can I ask a member to move that, please?
Simpson, Your Worship.
Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Darby. I will put that. Put that motion of noting the progress. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. Item number 16 is consideration of extraordinary business, and none was notified. Before I close the meeting, could we just note it's now just after 12:10. At 1:30 we will start our finance and performance workshop, and the reason that it's not following immediately is, one, you want lunch, and two, that gives local board chairs and Auckland Transport a definitive time to work to. So thank you very much, members, for your participation and your contribution today, to staff members as well. I will declare this meeting closed, and we can all go and find out what's happening in the National Party caucus today, which Wellington is very much focused on. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll catch you back at 1:30.
Thanks, Phil.
Cheers.
Thank you.